The college football offseason has a way of revealing its most human stories not in packed stadiums or under bright lights, but in the quiet tension between opportunity and uncertainty, hope and frustration. As the transfer portal settles and rosters begin to take shape for the season ahead, two names sit on opposite ends of the NCAA's eligibility spectrum, linked not by position or school, but by timing, circumstance, and the unforgiving nature of college football's rulebook. At Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman is welcoming back a player whose journey nearly slipped away, while at Ole Miss, Trinidad Chambliss remains locked in a legal battle that could define the final chapter of his college career. For Freeman and the Fighting Irish, the news arrived as a rare offseason victory that felt almost like landing another impact transfer without ever opening the portal. Jason Onye, the massive defensive tackle whose career has been marked by resilience and reflection, received official approval from the NCAA for a sixth season of eligibility. The ruling instantly reshaped Notre Dame's defensive front and in many ways reaffirmed the culture Freeman has worked to build since taking over the program. Onye's return is not just about snaps or statistics, it is about continuity, belief, and a player who chose stability over uncertainty in an era defined by constant movement. Standing 6'5" and weighing more than 300 pounds, Onye's path to this moment has been anything but straightforward. His redshirt waiver stemmed from limited participation during the 2024 season when he appeared in just 5 games before stepping away for a sabbatical that Freeman openly tied to mental health. In a sport that often demands silence and toughness at all costs, the decision to pause was both deeply personal and quietly courageous. It removed Onye from the field for the final 11 games of that season, leaving his future uncertain and his eligibility hanging in the balance. When he returned in 2025, Onye did not simply rejoin the rotation, he re-established himself as a pillar. Averaging nearly 30 defensive snaps per game across 12 appearances, including 9 starts, he became a consistent disruptor in the trenches. His production told a clear story: 26 tackles, 17 quarterback hurries, and 1.5 sacks, backed by a strong Pro Football Focus grade that reflected his impact beyond the box score. For a defense that leaned heavily on interior pressure, Onye's presence mattered, especially as adversity struck again. Midway through the season, Notre Dame lost Gabriel Rubio, a close friend of Onye's and a fellow defensive tackle, to a season-ending elbow injury. The loss rippled through the locker room, and for Onye, it became another emotional test layered onto a career already shaped by introspection and perseverance. Instead of retreating, he leaned further into his role, emerging as a stabilizing force for a defensive line that needed leadership as much as size. By October, Onye made his intentions clear. If granted another year, he would return without hesitation. There was no flirtation with the portal, no weighing of alternatives, no public posturing. His commitment was rooted in trust, in Freeman's culture, and in the people around him who had helped guide him through his most difficult moments. He spoke openly about how the process confirmed what he already believed about Notre Dame, about a program he never seriously considered leaving even when uncertainty loomed. Former Irish captain Myron Tagovailoa Amosa, now serving as the program's director of player development, was among those Onye credited for helping him find his footing again. The relationship underscored the connective tissue Freeman has emphasized, a support system that extends beyond wins and losses and into the quieter, more fragile spaces of a player's life. When the NCAA's decision finally came down, it felt less like a ruling and more like a validation of that environment. The timing could not have been more significant. Notre Dame's defensive line entered the offseason facing real questions, with departures piling up through expired eligibility and medical retirements. Jared Dawson and Gabriel Rubio were gone. Donovan Hinish had medically retired. Depth, once a strength, suddenly looked thin. Onye's return instantly changed the outlook, providing an experienced starter and a known quantity in the middle of a unit that needed both. While Freeman was celebrating a favorable outcome, another player was confronting the harsh reality of the same system from the opposite side. Trinidad Chambliss, a quarterback whose roots run deep in South Bend, found himself in limbo after the NCAA denied his request for a waiver to return for the 2026-27 season. Unlike Anye, whose appeal ended in relief, Chambliss's story has veered into the courtroom, turning a personal fight into a broader challenge of the NCAA's eligibility framework. Chambliss's connection to Notre Dame predates his playing career. Raised in the shadow of the program, he grew up immersed in Fighting Irish football, introduced to the sport and the school through his father, a coach who placed a stuffed Notre Dame football in his son's hands when he was still a baby. Chambliss attended camps, watched games, and absorbed the rhythms of a program that represented college football tradition at its purest. Long before Marcus Freeman stood on the sideline in South Bend, Chambliss was already a believer. That background only deepens the contrast between his current reality and the moment unfolding at Notre Dame. After committing to Ole Miss for what he hoped would be his final collegiate season, Chambliss saw the door abruptly closed when the NCAA denied his waiver. The decision, reported in mid-January, came with enormous implications. That 2026 season carried the potential for nearly $5 million in earnings, a reflection of how dramatically the sport's financial landscape has changed, with NIL opportunities now intertwined with eligibility rulings. Chambliss responded swiftly. On the same day the denial became public, his legal team filed suit against the NCAA, seeking a preliminary injunction that would allow him to take the field while the case plays out. The lawsuit places him at the center of an increasingly common confrontation between athletes and the governing body, one that questions not only individual decisions but the consistency and transparency of the system itself. The juxtaposition is striking. As Freeman welcomes back a defensive tackle whose eligibility extension feels almost like a blessing earned through patience and perseverance, Chambliss remains stuck fighting for clarity, watching opportunities slip through procedural cracks. For him, the stakes extend beyond college football. Even if the legal battle doesn't end in his favor, his future remains bright, with projections placing him as a potential top 10 pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. That path could lead to a contract worth tens of millions of dollars, a life-changing outcome regardless of what happens next. Still, the loss of a final college season carries its own weight. It's the loss of unfinished business, of moments that cannot be replicated at the professional level, of a chapter that deserves closure on the field rather than in a courtroom. As Anye prepares to anchor Notre Dame's defensive line one more time, Chambliss continues to navigate uncertainty, his story unfolding in legal filings instead of spring practices. Together, their journeys capture the fragile balance that defines modern college football. Opportunity can arrive suddenly, as it did for Freeman and Anye, reshaping a roster and restoring belief. Just as quickly, it can be delayed or denied, leaving players like Chambliss to fight for answers in a system that feels opaque and unforgiving. In the end, both stories serve as reminders that beneath the headlines and the contracts, college football remains deeply personal, shaped as much by resilience and resolve as by rulings and waivers.